was that which holds us in freedom from suffering. That's how he changed the meaning. So he changed it to a liberative meaning, or what Talcott Parsons, the sociologist, late sociologist, would have said, a pattern transcending meaning rather than a pattern maintaining meaning is what he changed it. And the heart of his Dharma and the heart of his discovery was something very shocking and very surprising and actually rather unique. And that, not totally, but somewhat. And that is, he discovered, or he said he discovered, that reality itself, and I think this might really surprise many of you who may know Buddhism or have ideas about it, reality itself is bliss. It is freedom. That's what reality is. That's what it isn't a vacuum, nothing. It isn't some sort of subatomic quarks running around. I mean, there are quarks running around, but that isn't the basic reality. It isn't God, actually, but although very close to actually what some people think of as God, but it is bliss. That is the reality of the world. That's what the world is made of. That was his discovery. And people are kind of shocked by, and because of that, and how do we know that? How did he know that? He knew it by knowing. He experienced it. And he didn't experience it as a mystical thing where, you know, this world is horrible and out there there's some bliss someplace. He discovered, he experienced this world as bliss, right here and now. Like how his body, his mind, other people's bodies, mind, the rocks, the trees, he was under a tree, you know, the sky. All of that is actually, in its deepest essence, is bliss, which is a very shocking idea. Like in our modern education, we are educated in a scientific way, most of us, all of us probably here. And what do we think is you get down to when you sort of boil all reality down and you take it all apart? Where do you end up? What do we think? Well, I know what I think. From my knowledge, I think that like there's empty space between the stars. There's like a blank space in the middle of inside an atom. And when you take everything apart and when energy seems to dissolve and you don't know what it is, what you're left with is nothing, right? So when things would boil down, you'd be in nothing. And then people purport to be afraid of that. Oh, the abyss of nothingness. Miguel de Unamuno, the existentialist, he was worried about the nada. And he thought nada was worse than hell, even, which, boy, I would take nada over hell anytime, personally. But he was Spanish, so he had a different idea. But, well, he was getting away from the church, I think. And so my point is that Buddha, he boiled everything down to everything, and he came up with emptiness, what he called. But emptiness is totally not nothingness. It is a completely different word in every language that it exists, and it is the complete opposite of nothingness. Emptiness is, in fact, the possibility of all relational things. It is the surface. It's like a mirror surface on which all relational things are reflected. So that's what he found at the base of things, is this complete free space where everything could happen, you could say, and no nothingness. And in fact, he came up with a wonderful insight that we can work on, all of us, especially anybody who's afraid of nothingness. Who's afraid of nothing anyway? Well, we all are afraid of nothingness. But we can come up with a brilliant insight that nothing means nothing. So therefore, you can't be afraid of it. And anybody who's a materialist and who doesn't want to be around for the consequences of our pollution of the planet and so forth, and be reborn in a more polluted planet and a more warm planet and a post-Al Gore world. Anybody who doesn't want to be there and thinks they're going to just simply die and escape into nothingness, which is a blissful anesthesia after all. I mean, it might be boring anesthesia, but there'll be no one there to be bored, so they won't be worried about it. But anybody who thinks there's going there will have another thing coming, they say. So you might as well live Pascal's wager in whatever form you want to live it in. So anyway, this is Buddha's discovery, and therefore Buddha's, the Four Noble Truths, the famous Four Noble Truths the Buddha taught, which I'm sure all of you can recite. Everyone should be able to recite that, know what Buddhism is. And that's one thing where you might think the opposite of what I just said. The Pope, for example, in his book Threshold of Hope, but the part of it was written, the previous Pope, part of it was written, the chapters on Buddhism were written by Cardinal Ratzinger at the time, who now is the present Pope. And he was very upset about Buddhism, because he said, how can it be anybody be Buddhist? They must be so miserable. It's like, life is suffering? How awful, how gloomy. And he didn't stop to think, like, what was wrong with Buddha sitting there grinning away? looking all happy in the middle of life is suffering. What is he, some weirdo or something? Meanwhile, we're so cheery, although that's the Romans. That's not Jesus. That's the Romans. The Romans did that to him. Jesus was a happy camper, really. He was so happy that they couldn't even make him unhappy by like dismembering him and so forth. He was a real adept, and he was aware of the nature of reality. I'm not against him at all. I don't mean just because I'm teasing Constantine and the Romans, so who like drummed up the cross, So my point is that the suffering is not the nature of the world. According to Buddha, suffering is how we will experience the world when we don't know that it's bliss. In other words, suffering is the way that an unenlightened person, meaning not some mystic, but meaning the person who doesn't know reality, doesn't know what they're really made of, doesn't know what the world is really made of, that unenlightened person will suffer. And so the first noble truth, which is true for a noble person, meaning someone who has awoken to the different nature of the self. Now, what is I pride myself when I give talks that nobody gets out of here without understanding Buddhism. I apologize for that, but I'm on sabbatical. So I'm not here to just give some piece of historical information like there was 2 civilizations over here and they walked over there. I want people to know what it is. They don't have to be Buddhists. In fact, we're against that. We don't want a bunch of Buddhists. The Dalai Lama says he doesn't want them. Be what you are, But we want them to understand what it is. And this is what it is, a system of education to overcome misknowledge. And what is misknowledge, or ignorance, as they would call it? Ignorance is not the failure to know how many floorboards are on this stage, or how many chairs in this auditorium. That is not the ignorance that is a problem. It is actually a wrong knowledge, and especially a wrong knowledge about the nature of the self and the nature of things, the nature of reality. And what is our wrong knowledge? For example, I'm sure some of you here are enlightened, but let's just talk in general, because I'm not. Let's just talk as if we're not. And in that case, everyone here knows one thing, don't you? Which is, you're here, and you're you, right? And you know that. And you also know that you're real. And not only are you real, but you're really real. If I jumped in there and started stepping on people's toes, you'd be really mad, because you're really real, and how could dare somebody step on my toe? So therefore, everyone in this room is kind of the most real thing in this room to themselves, right? Not only me making noise, you too, listening. You're the most real thing in the room. And then that makes you a little uneasy, doesn't it? Why? Nobody else agrees with you. Each one of them thinks they're the most real thing in this room. On top of not agreeing with you, they know you don't agree with them, that they're the most real thing. Most real means most important, right? Like, why aren't you in the middle of the room? Why aren't you talking? Why aren't you giving the talk? Actually, in previous lives, probably you did give the talk, and because it wasn't good enough, or because we didn't understand it well enough, now I'm giving the talk. So, I'm so sorry, I apologize. I would just as soon be taking a nap. It's past my bedtime. So that's just the problem. Each one of us is the real thing. And you might be a matrix delusion, I might be lying somewhere in a test tube, like in Keanu Reeves' world there, in the Matrix. And I don't know if you're really real. I hope so. But I don't really know. But that means that each of us is in this existential situation of being really real. Nobody else agrees. Mom, maybe for a little while. Or maybe you're beloved again for all too short a while. And yet the rest of us are just not paying enough attention to you. Right? So you're frustrated, and you're dissatisfied, and nobody loves me enough, and whatever, Can't get enough of whatever it is. And you versus the universe, me versus the universe. Are we ever going to win that situation? That struggle? Of course not. Right? Even President of the United States is definitely not winning that situation. Or Prime Minister of Canada, or nobody is winning that situation. So therefore, because even if they are president, and from Buddhist point of view, actually, even if you become a god in a particular world, which you can, And we have been, actually, according to them, the way the life cycle works, the evolutionary cycle works. Even the God, there's some bigger God over in the next universe. There's some like terrible thing goes on. So, Mrs. God gets mad at you, whatever. Or